Hello, foil fanatics, and welcome to Tinfoil Tells. Thanks for joining us tonight on this special Halloween-themed season episode. Tonight we're going to focus specifically on the phenomenon of the Dogman and other tropes that fall within that realm. We're going to do things a bit differently. We've got several different guests that are going to come on here tonight and talk about their experiences. It's going to be an interesting time tonight for sure. Hope you're in for the long haul because this is going to be an extra long episode. Before we get into any of that, though, I'd like to take this time to thank Vic from Dogman Encounters for making this possible. I'd also like to thank everyone out there listening. I hope you guys enjoy what we're doing. If anyone out there has had an experience and would like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tells, you can send an email to tinfoiltellspodcast@gmail.com. We can get you scheduled on a future episode. They don't have to be specifically Dogman encounters. They can be any type of weird encounters that you've had. We dive into Bigfoot sightings, paranormal sightings, hauntings, alien abductions, conspiracy theories, whatever falls under the whole tinfoil hat type conspiracies. That is what we try to get into here. Anything strange is definitely what I'm about. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the show. If you'd like to help me out, help the show out, you can share it around. Word of mouth helps expose this to new listeners. The more listeners we get, the more chances of new episodes coming out, more content for you guys to listen to, more stories to hear. I've recently released a book called Shadows of Cedarville. It's available on Amazon and other fine retailers, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. You can find them on their websites. Make sure to check that out if you're interested in this Dogman phenomenon. This is what the book is about. It's based off my own personal experience. And then from there, it kind of became a little fictionalized, but it was heavily influenced from what I went through and what others went through. I've used a lot of the Dogman lore to build the story. I think you guys might find it interesting. Again, that's Shadows of Cedarville. It is available on Amazon and other retailers. If you like the show and you'd like to leave a review, please do that. 5 stars helps the rankings, so that is appreciated if that's what you want to do. If not, that's cool too. Whatever you feel the show needs. I'm always looking for recommendations, always looking to improve. But with all that being said, I think we're going to jump in with our first guest, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest today, Jedidiah. Thanks for coming out and talking with me.
Hey, no problem, man. Anytime.
So where are you from?
Currently I'm living just outside of Roanoke, Virginia. It's down there, southwest, kind of close to the border of West Virginia, about an hour and a half away from that. Go further down south, you'll end up hitting the kind of Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, West Virginia little area down there, North Carolina. So, yeah, Blue Ridge Mountain sector of the Appalachians.
You had any weird encounters while you've been down there?
Oh, yeah. More here than anywhere else in my entire life, so.
Well, if you want to get started, I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. So I'll go chronologically with the experiences, and these do all involve what I believe to be cynocephalide, Dogman, whatever you want to consider them as, an Irish folklore thalod, if I probably butchered that pronunciation. I do not know Celtic or Irish whatsoever, but see, the first time I ever had a true experience with anything along those lines, I was living just outside of Vinton, Virginia. It's probably about 15 minutes away from where I live, on a place called Jeter's Chapel Mountain. Now, this mountain's always had a lot of different stories told. When I actually moved up there with my now wife, and this was back in 2012, it was before I didn't really truly believe in anything, besides spirits, UFOs, that type of thing. That was kind of just the generic stuff I really believed in. Didn't really even believe in Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and definitely had never even heard of a Dogman. But the experience I had there, I mean, there was quite a few of them. There was always the old sayings from her brothers, her dad. We lived on a horse farm, so it was very isolated, very quiet. But in the distance, you'd hear, you'd end up hearing almost like a drum cadence sometimes. you could hear footsteps out in the distance. And this is a horse farm, so we were a good ways away from pretty much anything or anybody. Sorry about that. Let me get that way back. Um, there was times when my wife would tell me we had a little one back then, Kimberly, my daughter, she was about 1 years old. So she'd call me to go outside, go to the van, diapers, wipes, whatever I needed to get formula. And, I'm an Eagle Scout. I've been camping all my life. I've been hunting, fishing all my life. And I'd never felt uncomfortable at night, for one, and two, in the wilderness. That place was entirely different. Um, I don't know why, but the amount of anxiety I would get just by stepping out the door, even thinking about having to go out there, was huge. Um, I mean, I had never gotten to the point where I'd actually sprint to a vehicle, get in there, get back inside fast. I mean, it got to the point where, I'd be out there some nights and it would be so dang quiet. You could hear, my foot on the ground in the gravel. That would be it. And then my own heartbeat. I mean, just a truly, truly dead silence. No crickets, no nothing, which in the mountains around here, that's really strange. There's always something running around doing something, but back then I didn't really think anything of it at all. And there were times when I'd go out there and, I'd be walking along or really running along. And then after I would stop, you could still hear another, a step, which I would be like, "Oh, okay, it's odd. Maybe it's a horse." And so it started happening more and more. There was more times. It got to the point where there was situations where I would feel uncomfortable even getting near the windows out there. But that all led up. I was about there for 2 months having these experiences, just kind of weird feelings, anxiety inducing. And it was a Friday night. I wish I knew the exact date, but it's been so long. But me and her went out and we decided to have a bonfire, out in one of the fields there, which was our back to the main barn where all the horses were. And this barn held, I think it had 12 stalls in there. I think there was like 4 horses at the time. And this was probably about, I'd say, 11 o'clock. Not a full moon or anything, like nothing cliche. It was bright, but not incredibly bright where I could see everything well. So we were probably about 75 yards out in the middle of this field, had our back turned, no alcohol, nothing like that. I was only 18, 19 at the time. So yeah, we were out there just enjoying it. And I remember thoroughly, the woods ended up getting quiet again while we were out there, which was odd because before that there was noises, crickets, you could hear, wilderness, wildlife out there doing their thing. And
very
it was all,
say, for Dogman, everything goes.
Yeah. And back then I didn't have the knowledge I do today about Dogman. I didn't make that connection. There was no, I just kind of brushed it off, I'm like, it is what it is. Maybe they just all went away. And I remember we had our back turned and I heard something that to this day, man, still makes my hackles raise in the back of my neck. But it was a very distinct sound of bipedal movement from the top of this. Like, it was a decent peak. I don't know exactly what it is, maybe about a 612. But it was a decent peak, but not super sharp on the top of this barn, but it was sheet metal. And if anybody has a dog, what the sound of their, a claw hitting metal or tile sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, a very, very distinct, like click, click, click. Well, it kind of stopped. And about 2 minutes later, I started getting uncomfortable. And I heard a sound. It was bipedal, which is what caught me off guard. It was a thump, 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 with that clicking at the end of it, and then slap onto the actual ground just to the right of it, and then heard something shoot off through the field back down towards where the other house in the property, which was empty at the time, and there's a lake down there, and backs up to the deep woods where Jeter's Chapel Mountain is, where there's just nothing but miles of wilderness. It made her uncomfortable enough, she lived there all of her life, pretty much, ever since she was a young child, that she said, all right, we got to go. We got to get inside, and seeing her react like that and then hearing that too, We packed up. I put the fire out, make sure that it wasn't going to go, and we go back. And it shook me up bad. I mean, I wasn't crying or anything along those lines, man, but it had me truly weirded out. I mean, I had never experienced something along those lines before. So we get back. I tell her brother, or both of her brothers, and then her dad about it. And her dad kind of gave me a look that I still remember to this day. And me and him have now discussed it more that, we're on good terms. I love my father-in-law. And we've discussed it. And he's come out more once I told him these experiences. And he's like, yeah, he's had similar ones. So it was kind of now makes a lot more sense. But the next night, we decided to do the same thing. Real smart of me, I guess. But we decided to have everybody come out. I was not going out there alone with her. I wasn't going out there alone in general at this point after hearing something that was so far-fetched and so weird that I'd never heard before. I mean, hearing the bipedal movement, I thought that, at best, it was somebody watching us up there. But that didn't explain the clicking sound going down. I mean, steel-toed boots don't make that noise, nor was the gap in the impacts. I mean, I'm 6 foot tall. I played soccer and all that. And the distance it would have had to taken to go down a 35-foot, you'd have to be sprinting. And I don't see on metal, especially when there's dew on there, anything or anybody that would be able to actually keep their footing on that thing and go flop, 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 hit the ground, and shoot off at the speed. Well, we all get out there. It was me, her brother, her brother's girlfriend at the time, her other brother, his friend, and then my buddy Matt. And then, of course, my now wife. And we were all out there and, around the bonfire and all that, just enjoying ourselves. And this was probably about 1 a.m. And, I told her brothers about it, and they started ribbing me about it. We're like, "Hey, man, why don't you tell a little ghost story around the fire type deal?" And I was like, "I'd really rather not, but I'll tell you the dang truth of what happened and explain that story to them." Well, Brian, which is her brother, and his friend Joey, they were like, "Oh, well, we'll go on over to that barn right now. We'll prove to you." I was like, "I really don't want you to go over there. Like, it's just, please don't." So they start going over there, and there's a door on the right, two big sliding metal doors so you can let the horses out. And on the right side, there was an office. Well, they start going in there, and as soon as they got to that thing, it went dead silent again. I mean, truly dead silent, which her other brother and my buddy Matt both picked up on, and they were, kind of looking at each other weird. I knew what it was again, and I was like, "No, I'm getting out of here." Told Courtney, I was like, I'm going back to the house right now. Like, I do not feel comfortable about this at all whatsoever. If they want to do that and what they want to be idiots, fine, but I'm not sticking around. So we're packing up everything, and I'm getting ready to put out the fire, and they end up sliding open the front two doors. And I wasn't looking at the barn at the time. Nobody was. And, they're at the front of this barn, kind of still just on the inside of it inside the dark. And I remember looking at them, and they were yelling back at me just like, "Well, I don't see your monster, man." And I remember I looked at them, and then I realized at the peak there was it's like a little wind vane that sits up at the time. And when I looked up there was a silhouette, and I had no idea what to make of this thing. I didn't see the pointed ears or anything along those lines, but what I did see was a very muscular build. Now, I'm 6 foot tall. I hit the gym all. This thing was bigger than me, but now by a good bit. I mean, and it was crouched down on all fours, almost like a human would, like legs splayed out a little bit, arm, almost like the Spider-Man pose is the best way I can explain it. And I looked up, she looked up, my buddy looked up, DJ looked up, and his girl, at the time, girlfriend looked up. And I remember hearing Matt, I mean, I'm not going to say the word, but he was like, "What was that?" And I looked up at that thing, and my eyes went wide, and I've never felt until the other situations I've had a kind of terror of seeing something like that. I was like, I don't know what that is. At the time, the only thing that I had semblance of was like the whole Slender Man thing went around back in the day. And I was like, It's huge. I'm out. And I remember I bolted, went to my truck, and I'm still not exactly proud of this, but I ended up diving underneath my truck and hid. And about the time I started to make movement, the sound happened again. And at first, I didn't want to believe that it was happening, but it was Brian and Joey on the inside. Their eyes went saucer big and went ghost white because it was right above them. And the same thing, just that flop, flop, flop hit, run off through the field again. And at that point, everybody just started scrambling like hell. I mean, we all bolted, got into our cars. My buddy Matt, I was like, man, you're more than welcome to stay here if you want, man, but we're getting back. He was like, nah, I'm good. I'm gone. Got into his car, drove off. We all ended up going back to the house, man, and bunkered down. After that, soon after, actually, the property was sold and we moved out of there. My wife still wants to go back there, obviously, to see the property where she grew up. Me, I could not go back there for the rest of my life and be very, very content. At that point, it was still one of the scariest experiences of my entire life because I truly, at that time, had absolutely no explanation for what. I mean, you never, especially back in 2012, the idea of a werewolf or something closely related to that, it wasn't even really a thing. I mean, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, of course, but Dogman, besides, the Beast of Bray Road or those type of things, and that's Midwest. That's not in the Appalachians.
Yeah.
It didn't really make any type of connection to me, but yeah, that was really the first time I'd ever had an experience with that. And the more I look back now, the more experiences I've had, the research I've done. I've talked to Martin Groves before. Me and him are actually pretty good buddies, and he's had similar experiences. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, man, that sounds about right."
Yeah.
And looking back, I was like, "Well, I mean, that's what I believe." As I said, I never got a true look at it. I didn't have a flashlight. Honestly, I always wanted to get out of there as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah,
but
that's the natural reaction, I think.
And rightfully so. Once you see something that big, man, I mean, if it was a bear, I'd be gone anyway. And that's something that's huge. I'm no match for that. And I know dang well I want to live. I would like to survive another day. So I don't really want to mess with something like that. So yeah, that was back in 2012. We moved into the city since then. And then, of course, I had my other two sons. So I was disconnected from the woods for quite a bit of time. Didn't really get to go hunting, fishing as much as I like, hiking because, I was raising the kids, working, doing all that. It was only about, let me see here. Yes, it was during COVID. COVID was about the time when everything started to shut down and I had time again to really get out in the woods, and being out there, you couldn't do anything besides, go trout fishing or something like that. And that was a good way to be outside and get away from everybody and still be able to get outside the house. So I started going up to, and it's a place called Arcadia. It's pretty deep in the mountains and also happens to be, the more I did research on it, pretty close to a Air Force base that was shut down, but shut down. It's still pristine condition to this day. You can hike up to it, but it actually ran Sage radar, which was also what happened to be in the whole Rosslyn, New York thing. So the whole portal theory, that was the same air unit, 173rd, I believe, Air Force. And that's up on top of this mountain just above it. Didn't know that until I looked at the topographical map from like 1978. And also happens to be very, very close to a huge marble yard, granite marble field called Devil's Marble Yard, which, sometimes you should look at names and really think about maybe why it's named that. And that was a old marble yard that happened I think they said dated it to like 40,000 years ago when this whole mountainside came crumbling down. And that's about 15 miles if you were to get up into the woods and hike, about 35 miles if you're on roads because it's pretty deep up into there. Now Arcadia, named Land of the Gods. Very, very beautiful place. Probably my favorite place in the entire world. Me and my son, Jaden, He's the big fisherman and outdoorsman like I was as a kid. We go there, haven't been there for a little while due to work and, different things going on. But we made it a point to go out there 2 to 3 times a week, especially during that time period when everything was shut down. And then, we love fishing, just getting out there. Well, more than once I've had experiences at that place. Most of the time, I don't like to even say it, man, but weather events do happen to roll up pretty quick inside there. Fog, rain, and that is what it is. It's the mountains. Of course, it's going to happen. But it always seems pretty heavily connected to these experiences, either soon after or soon before. Like, they'll say, oh, it's going to be beautiful and sunny. And then I get there and it's misting, raining, causing a lot of the rocks and stuff to be hard to actually run on or do anything on. But the first time it happened, I believe it was September of 2020 is when I had the real first experience. Soon before that, me and him we would be out there 2, 3 times a week. And there was this one little stretch of stream. It's called Jennings Creek. And they stock this stream with trout pretty much every 2, 3 weeks during stocking season. It actually just got stocked, I believe, yesterday. So I'll be headed up there soon. Probably not very smart, but yeah, I can't stay out of those woods, man. It's part of my life. But there's this one spot down there, and there is a very, very big old oak. And when I mean old, this is old growth. This thing is probably about 2, 3 feet at the base, massive overhang. It sits probably about 60 feet tall up in the air. It's huge, monster. And we were there a couple times before, and I would always have a hammock with me. I enjoyed setting up right next to the stream, dropping a line in, popping in my earbuds and listening to music, just enjoying the outdoors. I've stopped listening or having my ears plugged out there, needless to say, but I remember when I first jumped across this little gap onto the other side, I got the same feeling I got when I was up there on Jeter's Chapel Mountain. Just a feeling of, I should not be here. It was almost like it was like a barrier. Like you go across that stream, I did not feel comfortable at all. I mean, the brush was so thick, and I don't know if you've ever been over into the Appalachians before or where you're from, but the woods here are not. Oh, heck yeah. Then how thick it can get. On the bottom there, it's not a savanna like down south, or it's very, very thick undergrowth to the point where there could be something 2, 3 feet away from you. And if it stood still, you wouldn't know about it at all. It could very well be there. Remember, I jumped across up underneath this overhang and put my hammock up and sat there for about 5 minutes and had the worst urge, just I got it. I shouldn't be here. I got to get back. Packed up my hammock, jumped across, and I felt not immediately better, but I felt a lot better than being over there. That was kind of how it started. Almost I was trespassing is the best way I can really explain it. I went hunting on somebody's property kind of deal. And I started to go up more and more alone. That was another thing that I would do. I would go up there alone, and being stupid, of course, I didn't follow the number one rule. There was times when I wouldn't tell anybody where I was, totally disconnect. Dumb idea. I've always now tell everybody where I'm going. If I'm not back by this time, please call somebody, get them out there, get me, or find me, or what, my car or something. But I remember I came back with my son a couple of days later, and we were sitting there with our backs to this big oak, which is probably about 15 yards up the stream right there. It's in a shallow little point where you can't really fish at all. So we sit down in these rock faces, and I remember we were sitting there just talking, and out of nowhere, it was a widowmaker. It was a tree limb, probably about the width of my body. I mean, it was huge. Massive, came flying out of the tree, slammed into the ground, probably about 50 feet behind us, shot pieces of wood, bark everywhere. It sounded like a shotgun went off. First thing I did was grab him and pull me under because I thought somebody was shooting at us. And I was like, okay. I looked at him and he actually stopped and he said, Dad, I want to leave now. I was like, all right, we can go, man. Cause I was feeling really uncomfortable too. There was no wind. I remember that. It was a beautiful day, no wind, no nothing going on. It was just weird. I've been there all the time. I've seen this tree, and the tree's not dead either. That's the weird thing about this tree. It is not a dead tree. There's actually still to this day green growth on it. Um, but he started to feel uncomfortable, so we dipped. And we talked about it. I was like, did you hear anything before that thing went down? And he said, yeah, I heard a thump. And I was like, huh, that's interesting, but didn't think much of it. Like an impact on the base of a tree, almost. And, we packed up. About 2 days later, I didn't go back the next day. I was planning on it, man, but it had shook me so much. And then hearing him say that, I was like, yeah, I think I'm good for a little bit. But 2 days later, man, I woke up and I caught the bug. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like 35 minutes to there. I was like, I got nothing else better to do. I'm going to tell the wife I'm going to go fishing for a little while. So I went out there, and this is when I actually saw it. And I, to this day, will never forget. It was an experience, man, that I still wish I didn't have, to be 1,000% honest, man. Like, it opened up, they always say ignorance is bliss. And yeah, and honestly, part of me doesn't want to go back to where I was so ignorant because it made me so unsafe, made me so comfortable out there. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I don't believe in this thing. It can't be real. Well, there's the old saying, just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean it can't kill you.
Now, I saw something in '07 and it made me question everything, but I still struggled to accept what I saw.
I'm very much the same way to this day, man, because I don't. The logical part of my brain, and I think logically, I try to always rule things out. I don't immediately go to the supernatural or, amazing things happening. I try to break stuff down. Like, what could this be? Let me list off things in my head, try to make this actually make sense. It's when it doesn't make sense when you see something and you truly have no answers, but dang well you saw it. Yep. Like, there's no way around it. Yep. That you really start to rethink. I mean, I grew up being told all the time, oh, monsters aren't real. These things aren't real, and especially being, I'm actually a minister's son. So growing up in the church, you're especially taught, demons aren't real. This ain't real. That ain't real. But then when you start really looking at it logically, well, can't have heaven without hell. You can't have angels without demons. And why in the world were all these things? So basically, they're all either lies or trying to hide something that could actually be, they just don't think that you're ready for. Well, the experience out there is what really changed everything and made me go headfirst into the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, Dogman, cynocephaly, phalod, all that. I was sitting there with my back to that tree again. It's always the exact same spot we sit in. It's up underneath this little overhang of a small tree there. It's like a little 30-foot pool, man. It's beautiful. Huge, huge rainbow and brook trout in there, and they're only got like maybe 10 feet across where they can go. So I'm always at this hole fishing. I always call it the deep hole or the green hole because it's so clear, and then it goes into like this emerald green at the bottom, and you can almost see the fish swimming around on a clear day. And I had my back turned to it, and I remember I had one ear pod in on the left side. And my right side, where it was up against the rock face, it's like a road up here, and then it comes down, and then where I sit, and then there's the water right below me. And I remember listening. I remember the song, too. I'll never forget it. It was Empire Ants by the Gorillaz, a relatively soft song, and was really enjoying it. But I started to realize the noises had gone again. Now, the water was still bubbling. Like, you could still hear water rushing. It wasn't like the entire earth just stopped in a dime. But I realized that the noises of nature, like I've been hearing squirrels run around. You could hear and see deer sometimes up on the other little, you know, hills over there across the road. And there's always birds flying around, chirping and stuff. All that it stopped. But I had my earphone in on the left, so it didn't click fast. But slowly I started realizing, I was like, huh, popped it out, put it back in its case, and I had realized, everything was quiet. Now, my mind went back to that night at Jeter's Chapel and a snap, hearing nothing. And then also, of course, being taught out in the woods, if you're out in the woods and everything goes quiet, something's wrong. It's not a good sign ever. That either means that there is a large predator in the area, so everything shuts up as order not to be drawing attention to it. And that's the first thing that went to my mind. I was like, I need to leave. If there's something that's going to shut up these entire forests, and there's bear out there, they say there's not mountain lions, but there's definitely lions out there, man. They've had enough visuals, but the feeling of also being watched this time, now that was what caught me off guard. It felt like there was eyes searing into the back of my head. Like the best way I can explain it, if you're like in a Walmart or like in a store or anywhere for that matter, and you can feel somebody looking at you from a distance. You don't know where it's coming from, but you can just feel almost like eyes boring into you. That's how it felt. So I was like, man, I feel like I'm being hunted is the best way. I felt like the deer and the animals I've stalked so many times must have felt.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand.
And that made me more uncomfortable than anything else I've ever felt. Pretty much to this day, unless I've been stalked again, which is the same exact feeling, but it is a feeling like, still being a big guy, doing all that, knowing that something is watching you, you don't know where it is, you don't know the intentions. It's hyper uncomfortable. And, I packed up my stuff as quickly as possible and turned around, and I remember that tree. It's that stupid tree, the same one where that Widowmaker dropped out of. I looked at it and I turned away, and then I stopped kind of like in mid-step. And the problem is the way you have to get back up to the car is you have to walk by this tree. It's across the river there, but you have to go up probably about 25 yards and then snake your way up to where my RAV4 was. And I was walking by it, and I was probably about, I said, 25 yards away, and it's over there to my diagonal. And I had my head down, was actually looking at my phone like I'm looking at it right now as talking to you. And out of the peripheral vision, I saw something shift. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And I was like, that's weird. So I stopped and I looked over there, and this tree has a relatively black surface on it. It's old, it's got moss on it, but it's a relatively darker barked tree. And I saw a shape over there. I'd seen this tree 100 times, probably more than that by this point, going up there so often. And something was out of place. Didn't register fast because I was like, well, that's odd. What the hell is that thing? And about a little bit of backstory. I'm pretty good on judging height. I used to build houses for a living. I was a framer, so 9 3/4 inch studs, man. I used to cut lumber. I can relatively judge height off of ground pretty good. About 7 feet up. I'd say between 6.5 and 7 feet. I'm 6 foot, and this was taller than if I was staying there by a decent bit. I saw, and it wasn't the, Dogman or in a dog soldier ears, not the big tall looking ones. They were shorter, but almost kind of like a German Shepherd, but not that super high up.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it wasn't like the massive foot tall ear, but it was smaller and definitely looked like a German Shepherd, which is the first thing that went through my mind was, who let their dog out? That was really it. And then I started to really make the connections of, that's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And all I could see was kind of the top of it right here. Well, as I started moving around up this thing and around this tree, it exposed itself up to about here. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. Now, I've been in a lot of bad situations with a lot of bad people when I was younger. Being on the streets when I was younger as well, running around, you start picking up intentions by eyesight, or when something locks onto you, you can kind of tell. This was a look I'd never experienced before, and honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I peed my pants right there on the spot. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death. And that's the best way I can explain it. Like, I was looking into the eyes of something that could truly kill me and was not at all happy I was existent, there, anything. So, as I said, it was just a muzzle here. Head was probably about, I'd say, out to where my beard was. I mean, it was like not a pit bull size, but large. And I stopped, looked, and as I said, I did pee myself right then and there because it was like a level of fear I had never felt. You know, I've been shot at, I've been dealt with people that are crazy in the woods before, rolling up on, stills, grow sites when I was younger, going hunting up in the deep woods, and the type of fear that was so intense. It froze my body. It was like every bit of, I almost compare it to a Dementor from Harry Potter. It was like all the joy in the world was just snapped out of existence all at once. Like everything would just stop. And I remember and I've never have done this again. I dropped my fishing rod when I could feel like I could actually breathe again because it moved a little bit more out. And that's when I saw around the tree, about, I'd say 2 feet down from the head, four fingers. And that's what caught me off guard even more. Because at first I was still trying to really, like, is that a wolf? Like, we don't have wolves in Virginia. Why is this here? Like, is this just a hybrid of a coyote, a coy wolf or something? And when I saw something, and they looked almost like I don't know, I know you've seen a raccoon's hands. Very, very similar to that. Came around, but it was about the same size as mine, probably a lot bigger. I don't really know. I didn't focus that long. As soon as I saw that movement, it was like something clicked in me. And I realized I needed to get the hell out of there as fast as humanly possible. So I dropped my gear, probably about $100 worth of, trout fishing gear, left it on those rocks, bolted up into the car, and peeled out of there. And I drove like an idiot. I'm not going to lie. I ran that engine to its freaking core. I was probably going 65 up in a mountain road, hoping to God that a park ranger or a cop would find me. At that point, I was like, I need somebody. I need something. I need to get out of here. Please, God. Like, I just need to leave. Got home, sat down, gave my kids the biggest hug I've ever given them, looked at my wife and broke down crying and told her what happened. And I'm not so sure that, I mean, unless you've seen something like that, of course you're going to be skeptical about it. Like, but her reaction to me breaking down like that, she'd never seen me break down like that except for once, and that was on an anniversary of my grandfather's death. And she was like, I don't know what happened to you. I don't know if what you said actually happened, but obviously something happened. That was really the first and thankfully only full visual I've ever had of one. I really hope, other people are always like, oh, I hope I can go see one. I hope I can go find one. I don't recommend it, at least coming from me. I mean, there's people that are braver than me, obviously. More power to you, but I hope I never see one again full-fledged. I don't want to see one ever again. I don't want to feel that way. I mean, for the first time in my life, I really had to think about it. Like, my complacency of the woods nearly made it so Daddy didn't make it home to my 3 children. I was like, I may have not been able to make it out of there. This thing was huge. This thing was something that the hands on it were what really threw me off, man. It was like, if that thing wanted me, it could have got me in a heartbeat. There's no denying it. There's nothing I could have done. I didn't have a pistol with me. I didn't have a firearm with me. I was fishing. Now, whenever I go out there, I'm packing heat every single time. Not that I think that would even do anything against these. I don't know. We don't know where they come from. We don't know if they're interdimensional. We don't know if they're biological. I mean, I don't remember the old movie, if it bleeds, you can kill it type deal. But, I mean, a P226 running a 45 caliber, I don't think that I could slam an entire mag into it and that it would actually stop it. I think it takes something like a 6.5 Creedmoor or slugs, shotgun. I mean, as you said, man, like it really, I really wish I could still be ignorant to that type of thing because it's changed my entire lifestyle ever since then. The way I act, like even to this day where I live, man, I don't like going outside at night. I truly don't like going out at night anymore, even to get to my car. I will if my wife needs me to go out there. But like, I was also, before this happened, I was more comfortable with my kids being outside playing at night. We live in a cul-de-sac. We know all the neighbors. Now it's like once dusk falls, get inside. And, the experiences there have not stopped. In fact, in the last year or two, like from what I've read and seen, they're actually getting more and more common almost. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that, but it seems like the farther we're moving along in the years, there's more people either one willing to come out about what they've seen, or two, they are actually having more experiences. Like a paradigm has shift along the lines.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's like the veil's been pulled back just a little bit. And it's kind of,
exactly,
it's made it to where these things are more seen and widely, like, known. I feel like they're still not well known, but at the same time, there's been a lot more people talking about it. I don't know if that's because of the rise of the internet, podcasts, these social media groups, whatever. But I feel like more and more of these topics are starting to rise to the surface.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I believe you're right. I think that social media and the connection that people have now, like, back in the 90s and even before Facebook really got big, even during the MySpace days, it was still relatively like within your community type thing. And there was always people within the community that had these experiences, but either one, weren't willing to come out and talk about it, or if you did, you're called crazy. And which would then further shove that down. Now with the rise of social media, the connectivity that we have, video, the video capabilities, audio capabilities have gone so advanced now. Everybody's got a phone. Back in the day, unless you were carrying around a Polaroid or, had a really, really decent razor, not many people had them, or even the quality to actually take decent photos, videos, any type of evidence. Now, there's so much of it, all you got to do is look. But I believe you're right. There's almost like a veil that's been lifted, and what the catalyst that has caused a veil to lift some. I don't think that we might know eventually, but I think there's a lot of factors that do go into it. Like, the whole CERN thing. Those are particle accelerators and all that. I'm not going to go too much into that, but that's always been a kind of curious question of mine about it. And the fact that the U.S. has the world has quite a few more of them than just the big one. The whole thing with Roswell, New York, and the projects with them, the portal theories and all that, Martin Grove's experience around there. And then even stuff like looking back in time into the older days about the legends. I believe that there's a lot of stuff that, people look at older cultures from back in the 1400s as stupid. I mean, technologically, of course, they didn't have any of that. However, we still had the same type of brain makeup as modern humans from back then. They were not stupid by any means. I mean, they probably didn't have a great way to explain it, but there's a lot of coming from, especially with Dogman, there's stories in Irish folklore of the Faelot, and they were known as fishing cynocephali, essentially. Same thing in Greece. There was plenty of cultures that had these legends. France had the Beast de Gouver, I think. I'm trying to think. Germany obviously had a lot of stories about werewolves or walking dogs. The Egyptians had Anubis. This is something that a lot of different cultures have had throughout history. Mm-hmm. And then once more or less the Inquisition and all that, and then the witch trials and all that, that kind of all was buried pretty heavily due to it being demonic in nature. So they hid it. hidden knowledge type deal. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I've touched base on this on some other episodes too. Like throughout history, there's always been these dog-headed humanoid figures. And it's not just a new thing. Everyone's like, oh, you've heard about Dogman within the last like 40 years because of the Michigan Dogman song and the stories.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true because, like you mentioned, the ancient Egyptians had Anubis, which was a dog man or a wolf head of a dog or whatever. And then they had the werewolf trials in the middle, like over in France in like the middle of the 1700s, I think. And then there's been all sorts of sightings and stuff and stories throughout Native American lore. A lot of us say they were skinwalker, but that's different than what a dog man is. Some people
Absolutely.
some people get that confused, but it's there's still other stories about stuff like that. So it's like, where did all these stories come from? They're on different continents.
Exactly.
How did indigenous people from different continents come up with the same stories? It's almost like the same concept I have is like they also came up with building pyramids at the same time. How did people thousands of miles away build all the same stuff?
Exactly. I have the exact same thoughts with that as well. And they didn't have any semblance of the internet. Those communities were so small. The chances of you going 150 miles in your lifetime, unless you were a traveler or, had something it's rare, much less going thousands of miles to different continents, especially within those time periods, and the fact that you said the spread of time has been so huge and these have stayed in. I mean, there was cases, I forget exactly where, but with cynocephaly, a king let an entire army pass them just on the mention of 100 or 50 or 200 of these dog-headed creatures within the army. He was like, all right, you know what? Go on. I don't want to deal with that at all. And a little, it's weird because being in the Appalachians, especially, I don't know if you know the geographical history of the Appalachians and where we were connected to back in the day before the break, when the continents separated. The Appalachian Mountains here from New York all the way down to, I believe, Georgia, were originally connected to Ireland and Scotland. We were all the same mountain range, which is also exactly why they happened to settle here. When the Irish and the Scottish got here, they hated the coast and they started to move inland. When they found these mountains, they said, oh, home. Looks just like where we used to live. Well, we're going to settle here. Well, my theory is if these things have been around for so long, they wouldn't get up and leave. If the continents split, man, why would they leave? They would just stick where they're at. Well, if they happen to be within these same things, they probably will. Now, and when it comes down to it, the Irish lore of werewolves or the Scottish wolver, and as I said, the Feyalod in Irish culture, it's a really not, and I just even discovered this a couple months ago, which has been a huge thing because everybody talks about Native American burial mounds being heavily connected to dogmen. And I've noticed a lot of the times that these particular instances, at least where there's violence that come from a dogman encounter, like the Beast of LBL, the LBL encounters with Martin Groves, and then before that with the family and all that didn't make it. And then also with Martin Groves talking about the firefighter who was also subsequently found near, and then his experience, actually having them surround this camp and attack. And then he had more to say about that, but yeah, that's a story in its own right. But he talked about how there were burial mounds nearby that area. If you look into Irish folklore, and I can't remember the god, but there was two sectors, and it's strange. If you look into Irish folklore with dogmen, they were not necessarily violent, evil creatures. They were actually guardians of the sick, the wounded during war, of children, which matches up to some of the more historical accounts of, like I can't remember when exactly. It was like back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the little boy ended up getting separated from his family or her family, and then was basically taken care of by a large bear for a couple of days. I mean, you could take that how you want it, but for a while there, I didn't believe, if it's a Dogman, these things are inherently bad. Well, you start looking more into that. That was in the same range as where the Irish folklore came in as well. I don't think that they're all purely evil. I believe, yeah, if you get into their stuff, they like to scare people away. They like to frighten you, but I don't think that all of them are like that. However, there was a sector within that, and I can't remember. I have a link to it. I don't want to leave the link or this Zoom call because I don't want it to get disconnected, but I've saved it on my phone. But there was a particular god called the God of the Mound, God of the Burial Mound, and he was more or less what you could consider pretty evil. It wasn't a good one at all, and often took blood sacrifice, I believe. But there was a sect of dogmen apparently in that culture that were attached to these mounds, and they were not good. They were warrior class, very strong, but they enjoyed bloodshed fighting. And actually, what they required, kings would hire this clan, essentially, of what they were. And what they required was not payment. Well, I guess you could call it payment, but it was literally to eat the infants and the soldiers that they would kill in combat. They wanted their flesh. That was, their entire existence was fighting, murder, eating, hunting, killing. Much, much different from the other classification of that. And if you look in America, a lot of and it comes from the Native American thing where I think, as you said, the whole skinwalker thing runs in. It's very closely attached to burial mounds. Well, that particular sect of dogmen happened to be exactly connected to the god of burial mounds as well, whether that be Irish, Native American. I don't know. It's made me often wonder about that connection as well when it comes down to it all. But I think that there's a lot about these things, I mean, obviously, that we do not know. It's such a newer phenomena. Well, newer for modern day, but
newer for what people are talking about today.
Yeah. And I think that confining it to one theory might not be, I don't think that's, I believe that there could be, the old gods of Appalachia, as they call them, the older gods of the world, there could be connection with that. You look into the whole interdimensional theory. Who knows? I mean, there's been situations with the whole, and it makes me wonder about the Tom Messick case, the sound of, almost time space being ripped. What Martin Groves heard, what I've heard in Arcadia as well, which when me and my son have been out there, we hear that from up in the mountain, we get out of there. I don't play that game. When it comes down to hearing rock on metal or sounding almost like, the best way I can describe the sound from my own experience is like, have you ever seen Silent Hill, the old movie?
Yep. It's actually one of my favorite movies.
Same here. Great movie. But when Pyramid Head first shows up and he's got his sword is dragging on the ground.
Yep.
That's the noise. Mm-hmm. It sounds like metal being scraped across rock. And yeah, anytime I hear that coming from, especially up in the mountains where there is no roads, there is no paths, we get out of there very, very quickly. My son even, I wish he was here to tell you some of his experiences. He is at school though, but he's had, while we were out there, noises experience. He's seen stuff himself out there along with me, which he's thankfully never seen one full figure because I don't know what would happen. And it honestly terrifies me to even think about my child being there with one of those things because it's hard enough for me to, worry about myself having to, I'd rather die than my kid. Of course, I'd rather put him in a place, but I don't want him to ever be around that. But we've had strange experiences up there too. But yeah, the whole interdimensional theory that comes from that, at this point, UFOs, aliens and all that, I'm almost 100% sure that is obviously existent. All the paradoxes and all that, we're just showing, to think we're the only thing out there. Well, you look back and as you said, Anubis, the Egyptians, these pyramids, well, there also happens to be around those areas a lot of legends that involve dog-headed beings. So who honestly knows, man? I can't say they're not real anymore. I've seen them. I just don't know what in the world they are. which is almost more scary than if I had a straight up answer. Like, but
I don't think any of us will ever truly know what they are. Because
I think you're right.
as much as everyone looks into it, and even with having my own experience, I still remain skeptical on a lot of things. Because I can't say for sure that it's a flesh and blood creature. If it's an interdimensional creature, is there even such a thing as interdimensions? Like, there's so much unknown stuff that it's hard to pinpoint anything, and no one's ever really came at it from a scientific standpoint of how something like this could even exist, like biologically.
Exactly.
So it doesn't make sense, like if you think about it in this respect from science point of view, that there is no definitive, like, evolutionary chain of a dog being able to walk like a human or have the same function as a human. I can understand the Sasquatch because there is such things as other apes. Gigantopithecus existed.
Yeah.
We exist. So it makes sense for us, but there's never been a canine that's ever evolved into bipedal that I'm aware of. There's never been any evolutionary lines for that either.
Yeah, I agree
where
with
I
you.
struggle.
Yeah, and that's same here. As I said, I think logically, and I'm with you on that. I've done the research. I tried to look into that as much as I can with, trying to even find an inkling of connect. And there really isn't any, not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, of course, there's always theories that go through my head about it. Could it have been a hybrid of some sort? Could it have been, I mean, there's a lot of animals out there. We're discovering new stuff every day, new elements, new animals, new compounds. I mean, there's so much that we just don't know. But as you said, there's nothing up to this point that can be really heavily identified. Like, this is where it could be existent or how it could have come to be. I mean, as I said, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, I'm almost 100% sure those are real, man. Like every other, there's always the old thing, well, we can't have primates in America. It's too cold. Japan has snow monkeys. And yeah, I mean, now that would make sense. You said, I forgot exactly how you said the huge or more or less orangutan that they found the boat.
The Gigantopithecus.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like those, that's pretty closely related to what I would believe one would very, very much look like full on blast. I mean, and there's so many different sightings with those. A lot of people that have even worked within the forestry department around here have had experiences in Bath County, the Highlands of Virginia, where they've seen stuff along those lines, heard the knocking. I mean, heck, I've heard the knocking. I've seen the structures, huge nest sites in Arcadia even that are just like massive, big bedded down old trees that were knocked, down into the area. You find trees that are, relatively young that look like something had walked by, grabbed, and then pulled and snapped in the process of moving through them, 7-8 feet up in the air. So that's the type of stuff that's like, that makes sense. But when it comes down to Dogman, it's like, it's so foreign almost to logic that it's incredibly hard to try to figure out. Now, I've always been curious about the whole government being involved possibly in a creation of something along those lines as well, which the more I've looked into it,
with that,
who knows?
I struggle. I wouldn't put it past the government, but I struggle just because throughout history there's been reports of these, obviously before there was genetic manipulation by the government.
I agree.
So that's kind of where I come back to is like, well, then what were they seeing in the 1700s? What was Anubis supposedly based off of? What was all these cave drawings and paintings and stuff throughout history from different tribes around the world? They all were seeing something. So I don't think the government was making stuff back in those days.
No, I don't believe, like when I think about the government, I don't believe that they created this. However, if anybody in at least the United States would have knowledge of these things, especially with the whole, and I don't like bringing in missing 411 a lot because there's a lot of weirdness in that entire run as well. But if something's out there, they would probably have some inkling about it. If they did and they found potential to weaponize it, I could see them possibly trying to mess around with that if they actually got one. But that's as you said, we will never know, especially if they have their fingers into it, whether or not they've done some type of bioengineering on something already pre-existing along those lines. I really hope they didn't, because as history shows, they're not always the most, you know, smart and safe with what they create. Exactly.
No.
Or really go dabbling in. I mean, they have the best of the best in a lot of fields, but even then, I've noticed scientists like to mess around with things that it probably shouldn't be played with. It's like the old Jurassic Park theory, you know. That's because it can, doesn't mean you probably should.
No, definitely. That's how I feel with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I think we can wrap this one up. It's been about an hour, and I've got kids upstairs that are sound like
I feel you.
a WrestleMania going on. But
As
yeah,
long as they're not running suplexes, man. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I definitely appreciate you coming on here and talking with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, man, no problem anytime. If you're ever around my area, man, with your family, let me know. I know a lot of good places to eat, a lot of fun things to do around here, man. So,
Well, we're talking about making a trip sometime, maybe next year for spring break, so maybe I'll look into it.
absolutely, man. I'll tell you, Roanoke, Virginia, it's Star City of the South is what they call it. But for families, man, this place is amazing. It's
Yeah.
beautiful, and I can not say enough good things about it. But if you do, of course, man, let me know. Food and drinks on me. So,
Yep. Been a pleasure, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
hey, no problem, brother. Be safe, man.
Yep,
Glad
you too.
talking to you.
Jedidiah had quite the story to share, that's for sure. Definitely got the creep vibe going on with that. Want to thank him again for coming on here tonight and sharing that with us. Hope you guys enjoyed his encounter. We're going to switch gears up here a little bit. I don't usually do this, but for the sake of this being a special episode, I thought this was a little interesting. I recently received an email from, I would say it would be anonymous. It was kind of weird letterings. And then when I tried to reply, it says the email doesn't exist, so I thought that was a little bit strange. But with that being said, I went ahead and had the computer go ahead and read this off for you. Figured I'd add this little bit here as a transition between the next stories. So hope you guys enjoy this, and then we're going to go on into the encounter with Mary.
I saw a post that you were looking for someone who has had an encounter for your podcast. I had one, but I am not willing to speak on it publicly. Coming forward with such a claim would jeopardize my current profession and lose any credibility I have attained over the years. I will, however, permit use of my encounter within the confines of this letter in whichever way you deem appropriate. In the summer of 2018, I was on a hike in an area where I cannot disclose. I am already taking a risk by exposing this information, and I am not willing to chance someone being able to figure out my identity. During this hike, I lost track of time. This happens fairly often for me. I enjoy getting away from the normal routine and trying to enjoying nature to its fullest extent. As it started to get dark, I realized I needed to get back to where I left my vehicle parked. I wasn't too far from it, but it was far enough that if I didn't hurry, I would end up walking in the dark. I didn't bring a light, only my phone. I've done this numerous times, and have never had any sort of strangeness, but this time something felt off. I cannot describe it as anything more than just an odd feeling like someone was watching me. Being alone, I felt vulnerable. I wasn't thinking of it being anything more than just a feeling, but it was enough to make me uncomfortable. As I got closer to where I had parked, maybe within 1 kilometer, I noticed that the normal sound of the forest was no longer active. There was an eerie silence that I've never experienced before while walking down these trails. In my research, it has been suggested and observed that animals will go quiet in the presence of a predator. I firmly believe this was the case. Within the next minute or two, I heard something that broke the silence. It was the sound of something walking behind me, but at a strange pace. I looked back but saw nothing. Startled by this, I hastily kept heading in the direction my vehicle. I started hearing more footsteps along the trees as leaves and sticks were being crunched. It was coming from both sides, and what still sounded like was walking directly behind me on the trail. I started to run, knowing this was not ideal, but the primal instinct and adrenaline surged me forward. As I made it to my vehicle, it sounded like whatever it was had circled around me, but there wasn't anything visible. As soon as I started to drive off, Thinking I was safe, something stepped out directly in my line of sight. We have no known bipedal animals in this area, aside humans, but this creature walked as if it was a man. Its face looked very much canine in appearance, but its shape was not that of any I am familiar with. Areas of its body had strange markings or perhaps scars, as the fur was missing. It was not an animal with mange. That is the most logical explanation I have came across as a bear with mange. There are no wild bears in this region, but that doesn't not mean it is impossible. As it stood there in my headlights, I had came to a stop as it was blocking my path forward. I now believe it was doing this intentionally, as from the right side of the wood line ran another right up to my driver's window. Its breath causing my window to steam over. I pressed down as hard as possible on the accelerator and drove right towards whatever was standing in the road. It must have jumped out of the way, but it happened so fast that I am unaware of where it would have went, but it was no longer there, and as I was driving off, leaving a cloud of dust behind, both creatures were giving chase but were quickly engulfed by the pathway's dust. I tried to file a report with the proper chain of command about what happened, to which I was instructed to drop any further claims if this happening. In fear of any sort of retribution, I have remained silent. I now firmly believe that others are aware of these creatures, but are not able to discuss them publicly. I'm not sure how far the knowledge goes, or what the reasoning behind the secrecy. I believe them to be dangerous but also curious. They could have easily attacked me if they wanted to. I believe they were making their presence known, and either wanted me to leave, or they wanted to see what I would do. I would like to apologize for being cautiously vague. Be careful with who you speak with. There are many out there who seek to discredit their existence, and others who have more financial benefit by spreading misinformation.
I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest today, Mary. Mary, thanks for coming on here and talking with me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Delaware, but I moved to Ohio when I was 10.
Yeah, so you're not too far. I live in Indiana, so kind of in the same Midwestern states.
Right.
The good old Midwest. Now, you messaged me back a couple months ago about your encounter that you'd had, and I thought it was a little interesting just because of some of the details to it, but if you'd like to jump into it, feel free.
Okay. It was back in the early 2000s. Don't remember exactly what year. I know it was early 2000s. Me and my mom were heading home from my aunt's house. She lived over in PA. Well, we were living in Majory at the time. And we were driving home, taking the back roads, and how we would go it was called Hubbard Majory Road. And from Hubbard Majory, we turned onto Chestnut Ridge between Hubbard and Majory, because it was still kind of early. I mean, not really early. It was 10 o'clock at night, but it was early for us. And I've heard all these different stories about North Fox North, and I'm like, hey, Ma, I think it was end of September, early October, but it was still really warm out. We had our windows rolled down. I'm like, let's take a drive down North Fox North, see what all these stories are about the railroad tracks and whatnot. So she decides we had nothing better to do. She went for it. Turned the car off. When we got to the railroad tracks, turned all the lights off, everything we were supposed to do so we could hear the screaming, the crying woman. Nothing happened. I mean, we sat there for a good 15, 20 minutes. Nothing happened. Turned lights on, turned back around, started heading back to Chestnut Ridge. And it was clear when we turned onto North Fox North. Coming back, there was a real dense, heavy fog just at the entrance of North Fox North to Chestnut Ridge. And so Mom kind of slowed down, and because we couldn't really see what was coming. And we get to the stop sign, And out of this world dense fog comes walking this like humongous dog. We thought at first that somebody's Doberman Pinscher had gotten loose. So we rolled up the windows and we'd sat there and we're like, what is that? We're trying to figure it out because it was bigger than what a Doberman Pinscher would look like. And this truck was coming off of 62, turned down Chestnut Ridge, and as its headlights hit it, that's when we actually saw what we were looking at. And it looked, the only way I can describe this thing is it looked like a dog from Resident Evil with the chunks of fur and skin and all that missing from it. And it had its head down and was walking real slow towards us like it was stalking us. Well, the truck saw it. The truck stopped. Mom was trying to figure out a way to get out around it because we were absolutely terrified. We didn't know what it was. All we could think of is Resident Evil. Dog from Resident Evil. And she turned around. The truck stopped. The dog turned, looked at the truck, started moving towards the truck. Well, as it got closer to the truck, because it was closer to the truck than it was to us. And we saw that it was a good inch or two. The back of this dog was a good inch or two above the hood of the truck, and it was a lifted truck. It had the huge tires to it. And we took that opportunity. Mom took off, and I think we made it home within like 3 minutes. And it was a good 10-minute drive from where we were, and we made it home in 3 minutes.
Very
but
much
never saw it.
old ass out of there.
Yeah. We never saw anything like that again, and Mom, to this day, has not driven down that road.
Was it on all four legs?
Yes.
Do you think it's possible that, I know it's been thrown towards me about stuff as well, that it could have possibly been like a bear with mange? I know that's the always go-to skeptic's point of view of when you see something strange. Well, it was just a bear with mange.
No. Living in Masury and traveling that area, because I would drive and walk that area all the time, never once saw any sign of bears.
I'm not familiar with the area, so I don't know if bears are even there. I know here in Indiana we don't have bears, but we also aren't supposed to have dogmen walking canines either, so.
Right? Well, I told my boyfriend about it, because we've told a few people about it, because when we got home, my mom and me looked at each other and were like, I wish we had a camera. Nobody is going to believe us.
What did the ears look like?
Like a Doberman Pinscher's.
So pointy?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the one thing I always kind of go to when people say bear. Usually bear's ears, to the best of my knowledge, I'm no zoologist.
They're rounded.
Yes, they're rounded, and pointy is more canine or feline or something like that.
Right.
So
no, you take a picture of the old Resident Evil style video games, and that's what we saw, just bigger.
about judging, how tall would you think it was just on four legs?
As I said, it was a lifted truck that it was walking towards, and the back of it was a good 2 inches above that. So I would say it was a good 4 feet from its back, not even counting its head, just its back down to the ground.
That's pretty big for a dog in general. I don't know if any dog's back 4 feet from the ground. That's
Right. Neither do I.
How long would you think it was?
Oh. That. I would have to say probably like, I'm probably like way off on this. 2.5, 3 feet. Because I mean, it was massive. It was huge. But no, I don't know. I want to say like 2.5, 3 feet, but that just doesn't seem right in my head.
So that's about the size of a normal sized dog. So either its legs would have to be extremely long, or
Yeah.
I don't know. How long would you think the legs were? Did it look like it had abnormally long legs? Because the body length itself seems fairly normal. It just, I don't know how it'd be so tall if it was proportionate wise. It seems like its legs would be a lot bigger just to get to that height.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it was...
Basically, overall, it appeared normal size except the height of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know of any dog that would be really tall leg-wise, but more compressed, like almost like a stockier, long-legged dog.
Right.
Even even the biggest dogs that are like the
like the greyhounds that have like naturally long legs.
Yeah, Great Danes sometimes have pointy ears as well, and they're fairly tall, but I don't know if with their backs and everything, they're nowhere near 4 feet tall from the back part of them. So,
right.
The description from what you say, it almost reminds me, and I think I said this to you before, the old lore of the hellhound, the old black dog always patrolling around.
Yeah, that's what my boyfriend had told me when I first told him. He's like, honey, you saw a hellhound.
We used to have a area that we used to go to, supposed to be a haunted place, and on the way there was always a big black dog we always called the hellhound that would run out, and we've seen it laying in people's yards before, so we knew it was just their dog, but it was just a big, large black dog, and it always would come out and chase your vehicle, and as teenagers were like, oh, there's a hellhound. But,
right. Well, my boyfriend did research on the area because he's really into that completely by accident. But he's more into like the Bigfoot. He's found out that they have like a mini harp stationed around that area. And that area for years has had several like paranormal things happening.
Not to get too off topic, but I've always thought that when they put up these weird facilities or whatever, there's a reason why they do it in specific areas. I think it's because of the actual activity that goes on there. I think there's some sort of a thinner veil or something.
Right. Now, I believe it. But yeah, he did. He found out there's like a mini harp stationed there.
The harp is one of those weird instances I've talked about, I think, on our first episode a little bit that I've ever done. But yeah, it's that in itself's the reason I call the podcast Tinfoil Tales, because we dive into those conspiracies too. So you've never had any other experience with something similar to a canine like that?
No.
You had to guess what it actually was. What, in your mind, do you think it was?
My mind, Resident Evil dog. It's that's what it looked like. It's Resident Evil dog.
Did it look like there were fresh wounds on it, like blood, or did it look like it was just missing fur or scars, or how did that look?
No, it looked like old wounds. That just because you could see down to the bone and the muscle, and it looked like
almost like the zombie dog.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why my mom That's why me and Mom nicknamed it the Resident Evil dog.
Yeah. Growing up, that was always one of my favorite games. I know all about those dogs. First time I played it back in, I think, 97. Like I'm bursting through the window, scared the crap out of me and my friend, my little brother.
Right?
But those were good times.
Yeah, I could play the first game. After that, I could watch people play it. I could solve the puzzles. I just couldn't physically play it.
They got progressively harder, but I think they've gotten better over time.
Right.
Well, Mary, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me, but I think we're going to try to wrap this one up. This is going to be included, like I said earlier, on this special episode that I've got going on. So I'm trying to keep these episodes a little shorter just because I've got to try to compile them all together.
Right. And my story is so short on that anyway.
Now, your story is similar to a lot of I've heard from other podcasts and other witnesses as well. Like they see something and it just kind of goes on. But yeah, that's how it kind of happens. Like you see something, it's real quick, and then from there, like even mine's a little different just because of what went on, and I went back. But other than that, like a lot of the time, people only see these things for a split second or two. So there's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot to the stories half the time. If you have a big in-depth story, sometimes it's kind of questionable about if it's so long and intricate, how come it didn't attack? You know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, we weren't giving it the chance to.
No, I don't blame you. People said I'm brave for going back to see what I look for. I was like, I don't think I'm brave. I think I'm probably just stupid, but you know.
Nah, because I've actually gone back hoping to see it again and nothing.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want to see it again, to be honest.
Because I want to make sure that what I saw was actually what I saw. Because you know how sometimes it's like you get home and you think about it, it's like, well, was that really what I saw? Could it have been something else? But the size doesn't add up.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. A lot of people need that validation to reaffirm that they saw what they saw, so they're not crazy.
Right.
No, I completely get it. But again, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me this morning. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
And if you happen to see anything strange again, you know where to reach out to.
Exactly.
All right, well, you take care. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
In February of 2007, I encountered something in the middle of the road one night, and it really changed my whole perspective of what I could believe in and what I didn't believe in. I've always been a skeptical person, and when I saw this creature, it defied any type of logic. Nothing like this is known to exist, and nothing like this should exist, but I saw this strange creature. I will not say a dogman or anything like that, because it didn't have the typical dogman features other than the fact that it was just a large black dog that could walk on two legs. Is it dogman? Was it something else? There's a lot more to the story than just that, but that is the event that changed my reality of being able to accept the unacceptable. Made me really start questioning things and diving into stories and other people's stories about what they've encountered. That is why I made Tinfoil Tales podcast. So if you're still listening and you have a story you'd like to share, feel free to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. We will get you scheduled on a future episode. We're going to bring in the last guest for this episode, so I really appreciate all you sticking around, listening to it, checking it out, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Al. Thanks for coming on here and talking with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Brandon. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Absolutely. Thank you.
Definitely my pleasure to have you. So I've only heard little bits and pieces about your experience. You've had several and a lot of other ones too, but as far as Dogman goes, I know I was recommended to reach out to you. So if you want to give a little bit of background for the listeners about yourself before we dive into it.
Okay. My name is Al Sanariga. I'm a paranormal investigative researcher. I'm the founder of the Bronxville Paranormal Society. I'm founder of the New York State UFO Project, the founder of the New York State Dogman Project, the founder of the New York State Sasquatch Organization, and I was just made director of Region 3 for the North American Dogman Project by Jody Cook today. As a matter of fact, it was a surprise to me. And so, I have my hands in a lot of different things. And, you could find me we have a YouTube page and we have all over the social media, but mostly I'm on Facebook. That's where I kind of stay most of the time.
That's what I do too. I got these social medias and I hate social media in general. So I stick with Facebook because that's the only one I really tend to use. The other ones I don't mess with.
Yeah, it's just too many different media sites, and my partner has got us on every single thing under the sun, and I just can't keep up with all of that stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I stick to Facebook. If people want to talk to me, they can reach me at any of those groups. I get all the emails. I think the BPS, the Bronxville Paranormal Society, we have a hotline there, and we have a hotline for I think it's the New York State UFO Project as well. If you call, you'll either get me or my partner Brian, and we'll get back to you guys. And or you can reach me by private messenger on Facebook Messenger, and just message me privately, and I'll answer any questions you have, or talk to you. I'm very accessible.
Yeah, so I reached out to you, and within like a minute, you responded to me. So,
yeah, like I said, well, all the right people. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah. But
starting to get my foot in the door a little bit.
Good, absolutely. And once you get your foot in, once you get that door cracked, be careful what you wish for. Anyway, we were out one night doing an investigation, and we were bluff charged. Long story short, we thought it was a Sasquatch. After we looked at the photos, it turned out to be a Dogman. Okay, so it's being pulled back to that location, not knowing why. Went back to that location, and after hours of looking and not finding anything, I jumped up on this giant rock, and I moved some cattails that were in the swamps, and I noticed there was a den in the swamp. And I had my partner Brian jump up and my cameraman Bill jump on this giant rock, and we're looking into it. And Bill zoomed in, and when we zoomed in, we seen giant canine wolf-like head looking to the south, and then a smaller one, almost coyote-ish, not coyote, hyena-ish, looking at us, snarling at us. And we believe that was the one that actually bluff charged us, the hyena one. We found a lot of evidence that day. Once the veil was moved from our eyes, we found a lot of evidence, and went home not thinking anything of it. And then one night, it was maybe a couple of months later, because we were there in July, and it was around September, early October. Sleeping, and I'm a city guy. Grew up in the city. I live up in the country now, and when you grow up in the city, you live on the first floor, you don't leave your windows open at night because someone will crawl in. Okay. Yeah. But I had already taken the air conditions out of the window. It was a hot fall night. So I had the bedroom window open by my side of the bed, which is something I never do. And my wife is sleeping next to me. We have a little cat in between us, one of our cats. And around 3:00 in the morning, I popped up. Just felt like there was something wrong. Felt a strange energy, and I don't claim to be psychic by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have all the clairs. I can't do them at will. It just comes to me as it comes to me. And a little voice in my head said, touch the wall. And I touched the wall, and I was trying to get a feeling for what was on the other side of the wall. And it wasn't like a Sasquatch energy, because I do have Sasquatches that come by and leave me gifts in my yard. But it wasn't a Sasquatch energy, and it just had an ominous feeling to it. And then the little cat, Callie, not Callie, what's the cat's name? Patch. Patch jumped up out of the bed and ran upstairs. She was scared to death. At that point, I got up and I went and looked out the window and I couldn't see anything. The yard was pitch black. It was a dark night and I couldn't see anything. But I heard something sniff, go. And I was like, what the hell is that? So I slowly closed the window and locked it. I grabbed a pistol grip shotgun I have in the closet. I put around in the chamber and I started to walk towards the kitchen to open up the sliding glass door to put the floodlights on in the yard to see what was out there. And as I was walking through the living room, a little voice in my head said, stop. You don't want to see what's out there. Go back to bed. This is something that, is 9 out of 10 times I'm going to see what's out there because that's just who I am. You know what I mean? If there's something or somebody in my yard, I got to know about it. But for some reason that night, I turned around, I took the round out of the chamber, I put the shotgun away, I went back to bed like nothing happened, jumped in the car, went to work, called my partner, Brian. I said, dude, I think there was a dogman at my house. And he said, okay, when you go home tonight, check the backyard for prints, for tracks. Now, we had just had our backyard dug up because we had just laid down new lines from the well. We have well water. We had ran new lines from the well back to the house. And so there was a lot of dirt and not a lot of grass at this point. And when I got home that night, I went to the backyard and I looked around, and there underneath the window, because the lines kind of run right underneath my bedroom window to the basement, under the bedroom window were 3 claw marks, like to let them say, yeah, I was here last night, And I was like, okay, very interesting. I took pictures of the claw marks, the scratches in the dirt. I took pictures of the window where they were situated and everything. And I was like, okay, wonder what that's all about. Didn't really know what that was all about. Not putting 2 and 2 together, like why is there a dogman at my house? But about a week or so later, I go out in the morning to start my car. I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I usually go out. When I go out to start my car, I have 4 cars in the driveway, starting mine closest to the street, and my wife's, my daughter's, and my son's. And I go out. I usually take a can of pepper spray with me and a nice size pocket knife. Nothing, not a Bowie knife or anything, but a nice size. Because sometimes we have packs of wild dogs that run through the neighborhood and tear up the garbage, and I don't want to be mauled by a pack of wild dogs. And we have coyotes up here are the size of German Shepherds. I had one run into me and knock me into the tree and dislocate my shoulder, So I'm not going to be so I go out with my little knife and my pepper spray. I start up the car. And as I'm walking out towards the car, I feel like something is watching me. As I look around, there's nothing in my yard. I look to my neighbor to the left and I look to my neighbor to the right. There's nothing out there. Oh, before I go out, 5 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, I opened up the sliding glass door because we have this little cat who lives in a doghouse outside. Her name is Callie, and she's Patch's mom. Okay, and we feed her. I feed her in the morning, and then I close up the sliding glass door again. I lock it. Now I'm walking out after feeding Callie, and I'm walking out, and I get this feeling, and I'm just far enough down the walk where the sensor lights on the front deck are on. Have come on, and I can't see really anything under the deck because the sensor lights are blinding me. Walk out to my car, start it up, and I'm walking back, and I'm getting this feeling like there is something under the front deck. And man, I'm telling you, I every fiber in my body was out of control. So I'm the type of guy that if there's something that's not supposed to be there, whether it's a human or anything else, I'm going to approach it. We're going to find out what it is. So as I start walking towards the front deck where the garage is, Every step I take, I'm hearing a little voice in my head say, "You should stop right here." And I keep going. I pass my wife's car and I pass my son's car, and I'm coming up on my daughter's car, and like red flags are going off in my head, and the voice is screaming, "Stop, stop." I got my knife out at this point. I got the pepper spray in one hand, the knife in the other. And I just getting up to the front door of my daughter's car, and it's halfway underneath the deck. And I'm looking, and I've got my hand in front of my eye to shade my eyes from the sensor lights. And I start to see the biggest canine head you've ever seen in your life under the front deck. Now, the deck is about 7 feet high, and whatever under there is kind of hunched over to get under there. And as my eyes are starting to focus, I see like a lion's mane come down off its shoulders and down its chest. And I know what I'm looking at. And I hear a little voice in my head say, "You should probably start to backpedal out of here, you know?" And I start to back out slowly, and I'm backing out slowly. And as I get to the front steps and I'm going up to the house, I'm debating with myself. Do I wake up my son and my son-in-law, break out the guns, and go to war with this thing? Because I got plenty of guns and I got plenty of ammunition, and everybody in my house shoots. And I'm thinking, but I've heard enough stories that it never really ends well for people who go to war with these creatures. So I say, you know what? I'm not going to say nothing to nobody. I'm going to just go and go in the house, get my stuff, and go to work. So I do that. I don't say anything to anybody. I go in the house, I lock the door, I get in the car, and I drive off. I go to work. But on the way out, I grab my tactical flashlight because I want to get eyes on what's under there. You know, I'm just seeing a really huge dark shadow figure, you know, in the shape of a canine, a bipedal canine. So I grab my tactical flashlight and I put it on, and there's nothing under the deck. Whatever is there is gone. But as I walk closer to the deck, I'm smelling the most nastiest, pukous kind of smell. And I noticed that this creature has urinated all over my brand new retaining wall. And the urine is running down the wall, and it's running down into the drain. And it stinks to high heaven, and it looks like almost like an oil slick. It's got an oily kind of substance to it. It's like a slick kind of oily kind of look to it. And I get in the car and I'm pissed. I'm saying, man, this thing just pissed on my brand new wall. You know, that really burns my ass, you know? And then I'm thinking, as I'm driving, I'm thinking, well, this is a sign of dominance. He's trying to take claim to my house. You know, he pissed on my property, you know? Yeah. Not thinking back to the day we seen the creatures in the den. I know for a fact, now I remember, didn't remember at that time, but at some point I had to urinate, and I urinated not necessarily on the den because it was in the middle of the swamp, but on, like the trees that were surrounding the swamp. So maybe he thought I was trying to take claim to his territory, and he was going to do the same to me. So I get to work an hour early. I get to work. I'm sitting in the lunchroom. I'm drinking my coffee, reading my paper. And my wife calls me, and she's hysterical. And I go, what's the matter? And she's like, I went to open the sliding glass door in the back. Now, my sliding glass door has 3 different locks on it, again, because I'm from the city, and we're anal that way to make sure everything's locked. And up here in the country, there are no street lights, and it's dark. You know what I mean?
I live out in the country.
When you go from the city where there's always street lights and noise, and you move up to the country where there's no lights and it's dark and it's quiet, it's spooky, you know? So when we put our sliding glass door in, we made sure we got one with 3 different locks, and I went to open up the sliding glass door to feed Callie. And I was like, well, why are you feeding the cat again for? I just fed her at 5:30. Why are you feeding her at 7:30? That doesn't matter. What matters is when I opened the sliding glass door, the door started to fall out of the frame on top of her. And my son just happened to be in the kitchen getting ready to go to school, I think, back then. And he caught the door and he put it back up and he locked it all up. And she was really, hysterical because she could have been crushed, And I was like, okay, I'll tell you what, just leave the door locked. I'm off tomorrow. When I get home, I'll reset the whole thing. We'll set it all up. I'll put it back in and reset it and make sure all the track is set. Everything is okay. And then I started thinking, this creature went to my backyard. He went on my back deck and he tried to pop the door off of out of the track. I guess just to show me how easy it is if you wanted to get in, I mean, as something as big as this creature could have just ran through the sliding glass door if he wanted to, or pulled the whole door out of the frame. But it felt like that he was trying to pop that door out of its tracks just to show how easy it is to get in. I don't know how a cryptid creature like that would even know how to do something like that, but it knew, because there's no other reason that door came out of the tracks the way it did, unless someone tried to, knock it out. And that was the only thing that happened that night, So when I went home, the next day I set the thing and I said, okay, now I got to go back to where the den was, and I went back to where the den was, and I, like a maniac in the middle of the woods, I'm saying, listen, I know where you live. You know where I live. You stay in your house and I'll stay at mine and everything will be fine. Listen, I really don't want to have to go to war with you, but if you come back to my property, there will be hell to pay, and, it's just, I don't live that far from the location. Okay. I live maybe 20 miles, not even 15 miles from the location of the den. And from that location to my house, you could get here just going through the woods and maybe crossing over a 1 or 2 lane road here and there, like in a neighborhood. And like I said, none of them have any lights on them. So if it's just walking through the woods, through the neighborhoods, no one is going to see it unless somebody's driving up the street, And it's not unthinkable that it could do that and then go back to where it came from without being seen. And I have 100 acres of woods behind my house, and I have 100 acres of wetland across the street from my house, So there are plenty of woods around me, and it would be very easy for this creature to do something like that. And the thought of, a dog man ever coming to my house never crossed my mind. You know what I mean? Like I said in the beginning, I've had Sasquatch come here and leave me gifts, quartz crystal stones and stuff like that. But I've hear the Sasquatches go through, because they go from the swamp to my backyard, because this whole development at one time was apple orchards. And there are still apple orchards and trees in the woods, they're built up around them. As a matter of fact, there's even a road that goes up that they used to use to go pick the apples, So, so if the Sasquatch are coming through to get apples and going to the swamp to hunt, I don't necessarily think the dogmen are doing the same thing. I think that particular dogman was there for me, and just to let me know that he knew where I lived, and he just wanted to show me how easy it would be to get into my house if he wanted to,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically, that's like the short version, of a long story. But it's crazy. It's just, to think about a cryptid creature like that just coming to your house to when it put the claw marks on the dirt, it did it to let me know that it was there, you know?
I actually have some questions about that.
Go ahead.
You mentioned it was like 3 a.m. and left 3 marks. And I've often heard other accounts where people say these things come to them, like it's come to their house, it looks through their windows at them. And I've heard one, and I don't know where I listened to it at, but the guy said it spoke to him, but it almost spoke to him like telepathically. And it kept saying, "Let me in." And to me, recently I've started digging into things. The whole "let me in," the thing of 3, it's like mocking the Holy Trinity. It almost sounds like demonic to an extent, like it's asking you to let it in. Like it seems like a demon would like, "Let me in." You have to invite the demon in. It almost has like a vampire lore to it as well. Like you have to invite the vampires in. Have you heard anything like that before?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misidentification with these creatures. I think there are, it's just one man's opinion. I think there are a couple different kinds. I think there are the demons that show themselves to you as a dogman because they know this particular creature scares the crap out of you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the demons are these entities, these demonic entities. These are the ones that people say when they say, "I seen a dogman in my house. It just popped into my house." You know, I don't think it's actually a real, flesh and blood dogman. I think it's a demon, and I think it'll show itself to you in whatever scares you the most. Then you have the interdimensional ones, the ones that people shoot and they track them. There's a blood trail. They track them, and then the blood trail ends, and the creature's nowhere to be found. And I think I've spoken to enough world-renowned psychics. Whenever I do a symposium, if I get put at a table with a world-renowned psychic, I always have to pick their brain. And the one question I ask all of them is, where do these dogman creatures come from? And they all tell me the same thing, that there is a breed of a dogman that's flesh and blood that's here, like the Sasquatch. But there's also a breed that's interdimensional. It comes in and out of our dimension to hunt because we've got so much abundant food here, and sometimes they stay here, sometimes they go back. And then you have this breed that goes back to antiquity. You know what I mean? These dogman creatures go back to antiquity. And these creatures, these are our flesh and blood creatures, and can be killed. And I've known a couple of different people who have killed them, shot them and killed them, and burnt them and buried them. And, so I think we're dealing with more than one creature in itself, and I don't know if the voice I heard going to the kitchen that day with the shotgun that morning that said, "Stop, you don't want to see what's out there, go back to bed," was the dog man talking to me telepathically, or my guardian angel saying, "Dude, let this one go." You know what I mean? Yeah. I honestly couldn't tell you what it was, but I get voices like that all the time that'll say, "Don't go here, go this way," or "touch this wall and see what images you get in your mind's eye." You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily believe that Dogman was talking to me telepathically. I do believe they can talk to us telepathically if they want to, but I don't think it was. I think it was my guardian angel that was telling me, "You don't want to see what's out on that deck," you know what I mean, or out in your yard. It's just, it was just freaky because I probably would have started shooting right away with the shotgun, if I seen what was out there. So, I'm glad I didn't. And for me to just turn around and go back to bed and go to sleep is so against every fiber of my being. I'm not that guy that turns the blind's eye to shit. I'm that guy that runs towards trouble to see if I can, either help somebody or save somebody, and so, even that day when I was walking towards it and I had that knife in my hand, like as I was getting closer, I heard the voice like, you should open that knife. And I flipped it open. You should get that pepper can spray ready. And then when I got really, really close, I heard that voice say, you should stop right about here and back. Because if this thing wanted to, it was 7 feet tall, hunched over. I'm sure if it wanted to, it could have just reached out and with one swipe cut me in half. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I would have never had a chance against it with a pocket knife and a can of pepper spray, but that's all I had on me at the time. So that's what I, was going to defend myself with. But, it's crazy to think that these things will follow you home. And, ever since I had my very, very first sighting of a Dogman, it's like we've been linked. And, the first one led to the second one, which led to the third one, which led to the fourth one, which led to the fifth one, which led to the sixth one, you know what I mean? And it's just crazy. Yeah.
Why do you think that there's so much trouble to actually prove their existence? Like, you don't ever see any credible evidence from anyone. Like, we've seen them, people have seen them, eyewitnesses, and people take pictures. I've had people send me pictures, but a lot of them look like trees. I can't make out like a lot of, they say, oh, it's a Dogman. Like, that looks like a bush. Like,
yeah, no, look, I went to school for photography, graduated from the Center of Media Arts in Manhattan, and I get a lot of pareidolia photographs,
mm-hmm.
and everybody thinks they got the smoking gun. And when then you tell them, this is this shadow and, light and shadow play on a tree, but that's a tree bark. And yet everybody gets bent out of shape. I don't take any more photos anymore. I'm tired of fighting with people. I've been attacked a million times over my photo dissection of photos. I mean, I know as an ex-photographer, I know when I'm looking at a picture, I know what I'm looking at. I know what to look for. And with it's hard enough with 35 millimeter film that is, perfectly clear all the way through. But when you're playing with this digital stuff and all these digital artifacts and everything else, it gets so muddy. The water gets so muddy. 75% of the stuff I have never makes it to any of my sites because I have a very high standard of photos and stuff like that. I'm not going to put anything out there that looks like a blob squatch or a pareidolia. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not. And nowadays, everybody thinks everybody sees stuff. I mean, I'm get pictures where a guy walks out their front door, turns their back to the front of the house, take pictures of the woods behind him, and then circles 20 things in the tree and says they're all Dogman, And I mean, no, there's not 20 Dogmen sitting in the tree across the street from your house waiting for you to come out. It's just, it doesn't work that way, Yeah, it just doesn't. But you can't tell anybody anything. So, I keep it to myself now. But, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I got 2 photos. One of the Dogman that bluff charged us, okay? And I didn't even see it in the photo. As a photographer, because there's so much going on in a photo, I didn't see it. Somebody from California called me up and said, we put it all the evidence on YouTube and Facebook Raw. And someone called me up and says, that photo you got of that little wall? And I said, yeah. Well, there's a Dogman behind that wall. I said, okay, send me the photo. He sends it to me. I look at it. Right away, I think it's Photoshopped. I take my SD card out of my camera, put it into the computer, and sure as shit, it's there. There's 8 guys on the team, and we're looking at this stuff on a 60-inch television, and nobody noticed the Dogman behind the wall looking at us because there's so much going on in the photo, And then the same guy reaches out to me like a week later and says, that photo of you guys in the meadow with like those hundreds of orbs all around you? And I'm like, yeah. He says, well, if you look in the shadows behind the light at the bottom of the picture underneath the little red maple, there's a Sasquatch looking at you. And I start laughing. I'm like, send me the photo. Sends it to me again. I think it's Photoshopped. I go to my camera, take out the chip, put it in the computer, and sure as shit, there's a Bigfoot right there looking at us. And I don't know if it was there for us, if it was there for all the orbs we had going on around us, or if it was there to make sure the Dogman that bluffed charges that night didn't come back. I couldn't tell you for sure. I think it was there for the Dogman, to be honest with you, because the night we got bluff charged, we didn't know we were by a den. We weren't there for the Dogman den. I had found 3 quartz crystal stones set up in a pyramid shape. And we were there to do experiments in the woods on those quartz crystals. And the den just happened to be behind us. But, with the cattails being 12 feet high, you can't see the den. We didn't know it was there, And we had a Bigfoot come up and whoop at us 3 times and then throw a rock at us the size of a bowling ball, trying to get us out of that location because we were in a danger zone. But me being me, I wasn't ready to leave because I just felt like there was more to come,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I didn't leave because we did experience the bluff charge and everything else. But so I think that Bigfoot was there just to make sure the Dogman didn't come into the meadow or follow us, because we went from one side of the woods, which is like the Dogman side, to the other side, which is the Bigfoot side. And I guess he was just making sure that the bigger of the 2 Dogmen, the one with the giant canine head, didn't come over to their side of the woods. You know what I mean? So it was crazy. And and to think that, 8 guys on the team, we're all experienced investigators. We're looking at this stuff on a 60-inch TV and nobody noticed it because it's in the shadows just past where the light of the cameras could reach, And It's just crazy stuff. And that's it, 2. Those are the only 2 that I'll ever show anybody. I have one more of a big guy, Bigfoot up on a hill, behind like a bunch of leaves. I could see his outline. But as far as the photographs, those 2, and all the years I've been doing this, those are the only 2 I show. So don't send me a picture of you, a selfie, taking pictures of you and circle 13 things in a tree and tell me they're all Dogmen or Bigfoot, because I'm telling you, you're delusional. It just doesn't happen that way,
That's how I feel. I just don't say it to people. I was like, I think it's pareidolia because I don't see anything in these photos. I see blobs. I see leaves. I see tree trunks. I'm not saying that they're not seeing what they think they're seeing, but I don't see what they're seeing.
No, and look, and our brain is wired to see faces and just about everything. You see the commercial where they show the sink, the fire hydrant, and all of these things look like a face, and that's how our brain is hot wired. So if you're looking at a photo that's super pixelated, right? Because you're blowing it up, and your brain will make faces in that photo, and if you have Dogman on your mind, you'll see faces with a snout. If you have Bigfoot on your mind, you'll see faces with conical heads. You know what I mean? Because that's what your brain is hot wired to see. But it's not there. It's not there. It's pixelation. It's blob squatch. It's shadow and light, but you can't tell these people anything. So I don't fight with anybody. If that's what you think you're seeing, and more power to you. But I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. I'll tell you about my encounter off air. I don't want to do it on here.
Okay.
But yeah, that's mine's a little different from most people's.
Okay.
But I think we could probably wrap this up. I do want to say,
like I said, I kept it short.
I definitely appreciate you coming on here and talking with me. It's been my pleasure.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's all my pleasure. Believe me, it's my pleasure. Anytime someone reaches out to me to do an interview, I don't care if you have 1 follower or 1 million followers. If you ask me to come on and my schedule allows me to do it, I will come on because I'm honored that I was asked.
Yeah. Lately people have been asking me to come on their shows to talk about my experience. I was on Vic's show a couple months ago. And now I've just been getting I think I have 5 or 6 interviews in the next couple of weeks of me going on to other people's shows. And I've had a couple in the last week so this is weird for me because I'm usually the one doing the interview. I'm not the one being interviewed. But
yeah, I used to be a podcaster and I hated it, to be honest with you, because I spent so much time doing research on the guest for the show because I wanted the show to go off without a hitch. And there was three of us. It was me, my partner, Brian, and our team psychic. And, Brian was a tech guy. The psychic just did what the psychic did. And I got the guest and I did all the research on the guests and everything else. And I was just spending so much time on the show that I wasn't getting out into the woods anymore or investigating. And I'm happiest when I'm out in the field investigating. Doesn't matter what I'm investigating, whether it's ghosts, aliens, or cryptids. I like to be out there. Like I just went out last Friday night, Friday the 13th. It was 1% of the moon. It was Friday the 13th. I was on a place of high strangeness, and it was crazy. Okay. I'm going back out on the 28th because the 28th is a full moon, the total opposite of the 1% of the moon. Mm-hmm. And I want to see how the energy is different from 1% of the moon compared to a full moon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm going back out and I'm psyched about that. And that's why I'm happy. I'm carrying a 50-pound bag on my back. I'm hiking 4 miles into the woods and 4 miles out in the middle of the night. But I know it sounds crazy, but that's when I'm at my happy place.
Yeah. No, I don't go out into the woods. I never really did, and anymore. I've said whatever happened to me never really impacted me, but I thought about this after I said this. It kind of did, because I don't think I've ever been camping out in the woods ever since then. And this was back in 2007. Like I subconsciously don't do that stuff without thinking about it.
I know guys that we've had some really scary experiences in the woods. Like, if you really sat down and think about it, we could have died a couple of times, and when they sit back and think about it, they won't go out in the woods anymore at night. They'll go during the day, but they won't go at night. And then I've had guys who, I've had a couple of attachments on paranormal investigations, nothing dark or negative, but just something that attached to me a couple of times. And they've seen that I've had and when I leave, the attachment comes off. But I've had guys that say, you know what, I'm done with that ghost hunting stuff because I don't want to bring anything home, as well. Yeah. And I get it. I understand both ends of the spectrum. You don't want to bring anything dark and negative home, because I've had friends who've gone squatching and brought dark stuff home that they call me, and then I have to call other people to go there to cleanse their house. You know what I mean? Because there's something dark and negative in it. And I know people, like I said, we could have died a couple of times. For sure, we could have died, Mm-hmm. I probably could have died every time I've gone out, but for sure there was 2 times that was really scary. And again, with the ghost hunting stuff, people do get attachments, and some people get dark stuff, and they live with it for years, or they can't get rid of it, and it takes a special somebody to get that stuff off of them. So I get it when guys say, I'll do this, I'll do aliens, but I won't do ghosts, or I'll do Bigfoot, but I won't do aliens, or vice versa, so I get it.
I go into the rabbit hole on all sorts of topics, so I'm kind of exposed to a lot of it these days. But again, I want to say thanks for coming on here and talking with me. It's been a pleasure.
Again, the pleasure was all mine, Brendan. Anytime you want to go down the rabbit hole with me, you let me know.
Yeah, I definitely will. I enjoy having these discussions. You want to let everyone know one more time where they can get a hold of you at and everything else that you've been up to?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. Is the place to find me. The Bronxville Paranormal Society, the New York State UFO Project, the North American Dogman Project, New York State Chapter, the New York State Dogman Project, and the New York State Sasquatch Organization. I'm the founder of all of those, and you could just reach out to me personally, Al Santariga. I go by the Squatch Father these days. I was labeled the Squatch Father, and it kind of just stuck.
Yeah. All righty. Well, I think we're going to roll on out of here. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's going to do this special episode here tonight. I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank Jedidiah, Mary, and Al for coming on here and sharing their experiences with me. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to them. And if you have an experience that you would like to talk about, send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. We'll get you scheduled for a future episode. But again, thanks to everyone for listening. I think we're going to roll on out now. So good night, everyone.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.